Okay, this is the Symbiota2 September 15th, 2021 meeting. I didn't have time to make up slides, but I'll just throw this out before we start. And I talked to Evan yesterday. And so we are at the point where any developer can jump in and start developing plugins. They can, and those come in two forms. They can either develop plugins that fit right into Symbiota, or they can, if they have some third-party resource, like MorphoSource or Field Guide or a taxonomy service, then it's simply a matter of, in most cases, making an API connection. But today, on September 15, 2021, there is nothing preventing any developer from moving forward. They would be using our test data, so we're not ready to have them use full data sets, but they can do this. And I just want to reiterate, this was probably the most important impetus for doing Symbiota2, because prior to that, there was essentially two developers. And everybody agreed that the code, the way Matt Yoder put it was, the code was crap, the community was cool. And so the code worked for everybody, but it did not attract other developers because it was, it really just needed to be redone. And so that's hopefully what we've done with Symbiota2. But as far as I know, we are still currently at that stage of not attracting other developers. And so this will be a really important test in the next couple of months, whether we can attract developers. And it doesn't necessarily have to be developers. It can be end users that come up with requests for developers to do, and to go out and engage developers and say, okay, here's this refurbished Symbiota2. It would be so great if you could develop a plugin for phylogeny, phonology, whatever it is that you want to do. That would be great. So the estimate for when Symbiota2 will be fully functional, have all of the basic functions, will be January of next year. So in about 5 months is the estimate when everything will be put in place. In part, if we can get other people to help finish with the coding or documentation, that would be wonderful, and we can finish up earlier. And so with that sort of introduction, Curtis, Evan, did I leave anything out or misstate anything?
No, I think that sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Then, and so after this, probably mostly between Mary and I, we will reach out to people and sort of prod them to get people on board, and hopefully we'll be successful in doing that. Okay, so for today's review, I assume Curtis, Darius, and Evan, you all have things to talk about. Does anybody want to go first?
I can go.
I can go first.
Okay,
Right.
go for it.
Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm able to share my screen. Okay, so the thing that I've been working on is image search. And it turns out in Symbiota, for those familiar with Symbiota, there's 3 different ways to do image search. And so I've been working on all 3 ways. And I finished one of the ways. So I'm going to show you that. And the other 2 are very close. So I can show those next time. So it's this link up here, the image library. And now in Symbiota, I'm just mimicking the Symbiota functionality. So this is what Symbiota itself has for their images. So basically, one of the ways that you search for images is you bring up a list of families, or you could bring up a list of genus, or you could browse by species directly. And then we click on one of these, and I just want to click on one that I know that has images in it. Let's see, AP. So I didn't design this interface. This was, I'm duplicating what Symbiota does. And if I click up on the family, it brings up all the species for that particular family. And I can click on a particular profile, and it brings up the profile with all the images. And now for this particular profile, there's no description for this particular profile. And I can click on an individual image. And when I click on the individual image, it gives me all the details for that particular image. And so that form of sort of browsing through those images works. The thing I'm going to produce by the end of this week is the other image search, where you put in you search on various categories. And so you're searching, for instance, on the photographer name or things like that, and it runs a query and brings back the images in a gallery. And so I'm working on that gallery code right now for the images. But basically, that's what I have so far. So the image library and the image search is all very close. And so now we have the taxonomy and the image. And the only thing that's missing from the taxonomy, or the key thing that's missing from the taxonomy, is I still haven't done the batch upload for the taxonomy, and I still haven't done the batch upload for the image library. And so those will be after this week, is what I'm going to work on next in terms of coding. So with that, I will turn it over to, first I'll ask, are there any questions or?
Mary, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
I've unmuted myself now. I think my question is just to check, when you're doing the searching on, you said my photographer's name and things like that, does that include tags? Because I've never bothered with tags.
Yeah.
It seems like they're more important now.
I'm going to duplicate the functionality that is in the original Symbiota. So the image tag is there. Now, there's not that many photos that actually have tags.
Okay, so I'm not unusual then. But
Yeah.
I think the
But
problem
it's there,
really
so you can
is
see
no agreement on what we want to tag within the plant world, but I may be wrong on that. But anyway, thank you.
I think that may be true of all communities, but
I don't like to malign other groups.
there
My own is fine.
is strength in diversity.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Evan.
Cool. So mine's short. I've sort of been working with Darius, doing backend stuff for his user interface stuff this time, but I did want to touch on, can you guys see my browser? I did want to touch on what Neil was talking about as far as the 2 different types of ways people can utilize Symbiota from an informatics or a code standpoint. So the first is like we're doing right now, right? Like you pull down all the code, you develop a plugin that adds extra functionality to the user interface that we've all been sharing with you over the course of these meetings. And that's a plugin. The second type of way you can integrate that didn't exist in Symbiota 1 is access via the API. So you have to bear with me. I'm not a biologist. For this demo, I'm pretending to be a biologist doing science by pulling data from the Symbiota2 backend. So let's say my favorite portal for plants has adopted Symbiota2. I can browse to their documentation and take a look at all of the different ways I can pull data from that backend of the portal. And I want to look up things about families. So this is a tiny little app that I wrote in about 30 minutes that will, you can see me pretending to be a plant scientist again, that will load up details about a family. And like I said, I wrote this in about 10 minutes or 30 minutes.
I was going to say change.
What's that, Mary?
30 down to 10 was quite a drop.
Yeah, right. No, in about 30 minutes. And I can just pull data from the Symbiota2 backend of my favorite portal without ever knowing how Symbiota2 calculates or pulls this data from a database. So I can just link with the API. I can use all these routes to pull that data out. And like I said, I don't need any knowledge of the Symbiota2 code to sort of do analyses on some of the different things. Obviously, my analyses are pretty lacking here. I don't have anything that interesting, but it's just an example of how it doesn't need to be something you can look at. You can also pull data, do math on it, and directly do data access without, the way that it works now. You're downloading CSVs, you're running R scripts or whatever it is on those CSVs in order to generate data. Now you can actually just directly pull it from the web. And so that was kind of my example. Questions on API usage to do science? All right, cool. I will turn it over to Darius. Thanks.
Hello. Okay, so I've been working on some of the more front-end stuff, specifically in the collection. And me and Evan have been working with the comment functionality, but I think we're going to save that. I think we can, there's a lot more functionality to add with the comments before we show it off. So I will be showing off the collection tool. So gotta move my desktop around. Okay. So before we have like our collection homepage here, and before if you were an admin, like I am myself here, we would have a pop-up of tools kind of display all the different tools you can use, and they would all link to different pages. And so we've kind of changed that with this edit button. Before this was editing collections, but if you click on it now, it brings you to an like kind of an admin tool dashboard with this navigation and displaying the tool. So what's cool about this is it is definitely developer friendly with the plugins, because this every tool is just in a list. So you just have a string that has the title of the component, and then you have the component itself in this static list for the class. So you can add to it from other plugins, and it will display your tool here. So if any other developers wanted to have any like number crunching tools for admins or anything else that they might need, they can easily add it to this page. You can see we've moved the edit collection into this page too. So if I wanted to edit this collection, it's here. And we also have our user permissions page, which needs a little styling, but I'll work on that. That will display our admins and editors and our rare species readers, and has capabilities of displaying other user roles as we move along with this project. And so if we wanted to add, let's add Mary as a rare species reader, we can go ahead and add that. And we see her pop up here in our rare species. So that's pretty much what I've been working on. And like I said, it's more, I wanted to separate this page. That way, when we have a bunch of tools, they're all easily accessible right here. And any questions?
Nope, looks,
Oh, I thought I heard somebody.
Mm.
So let's see if I could just show some code real quick. Oh boy. Okay. So if we go to our collection tools page, we have our list right here. So right here, we simply just set the tag and then the component right here, and then it adds it to our page. And if we were to look at our HTML, I know this is probably a lot for anyone that's not programming. It's not that bad, I promise you guys.
it's pretty.
We can see our, oh, this is the permissions page. Whoops. Here it is. All right, cool. So our HTML is simply generated from our set of collection tool keys, and we can see our container that holds our selected tool or selected content. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. Any questions?
I just want to say it looks really great and really clean for somebody who does understand the code. It looks good. And for anybody who's used Symbiota for a long period of time, you know that you spend a lot of time looking at your specific collections page and the tools embedded within that page. And so making this user interface really extensible, like you said, Darius, to add number crunching tools or whatever customizations you want to add, I think is going to be pretty great for the user experience. So making things easier to find than they are now and making things more customizable than they are now, I think is a great thing. So looks cool.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, it would be good.
Oh yeah, Will.
Question. Does that make it any easier to put analytics on an individual collection or not?
Yeah, I mean, it has a page right there. And so once you're on that page, you have access to the collection that's currently like in the URL, you'll have the collection ID. So you'll be able to grab the collection from there. So I think it would probably make it easier. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
Being able to just
Because it is something people ask about. And, but as you know.
Well, I mean, as far as the math, I mean, and actually like computing the numbers, you're going to have to go ahead and do that on your own. But displaying that on a page and having not having to develop like a route and everything like that, it's just simply adding it to an already existing page. Makes it easier for anybody that wants to develop a tool.
Okay.
Will?
Cool, yeah, thank you. And sorry for joining a bit late. As I mentioned to some of you, it's exam season in the UK, so apologies for that. I just actually wanted to say, so as Evan did such a really great job of showing off the API there and showing the kind of cool things you can do with it, I thought it might be, maybe I could share my screen for 10 seconds and show everybody just where the R package is. Would that be all right? Which does.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. So So thanks everyone. So I wasn't necessarily expecting to do this today, but just because Evan just did such a great job there of showing that, I just wanted to show this off really. So, and this is mostly work from a student in my lab, Austin Koontz, who's now in Chicago actually. But anyway, if you go to github.com/ropenSci/Symbiota2, and I'll put the link here in the chat in a second, you can see the website for the published R package. Here's the paper for it. Oh, look, it's peer reviewed and everything. It's open peer review as well, so you can see that happening. That shows you how to do much the same thing that Evan was just showing then, but I would describe it as much more for the rest of us, kind of, you know, those for dummies books that used to be like a guide to, you know, guide to Symbiota2 for the rest of us kind of thing. So the cool thing here is it allows you to do much the same stuff that Evan was describing there, but from within R. So, and the 4 steps that you would need are here on this. So step 1 would be to define the API that you're using. And so that's the demo API that Evan was sharing around. Second step is to install the Symbiota2 R package. Third step is to load it. Oh, sorry, there's 5 steps. Fourth step would be to pick what particular part of the API you want to use. So Evan was scrolling through there, all the different API, what we call API endpoints. So just things like, do you want to download location data? Do you want to download information about collections? Whatever it is you want to do, pick the one you want to download from using the documentation inside the R package or from going to the API itself, and then run the appropriate function. And there it is, it's in your code for you. And so, you know, and obviously some of those steps, actually steps 1 through 3 can be automated for you, right? You only have to install it once, you only have to load it once, well, every session. And then you can actually set up a default URL. You'll be prompted for this when you use the package to say, do you want to by default use scan because it's great, or, you know, or my particular favorite one because it's even better kind of thing. And so that's something I'd really sort of encourage you all to have a look into. And there's some demo there in terms of like how to install the working copy right now, because remember, we are updating the API semi-regularly, so you'll probably want to use the freshest version that's up on GitHub, and then some information for how you can contribute to it in terms of sort of development if you're that way inclined. So anyway, just like I say, sorry to sort of jump in there, but just because Evan did such a great job, I just wanted to kind of jump on the bandwagon a bit.
Well, that was great, Will.
Yeah, much better example than mine. Thanks, Will.
No, not at all. Actually, I was really excited to see that, and I think, Evan, that really demonstrates the power of it. You know, and I hope everybody's seeing. You know, the idea of this API is to really democratize this.
Right.
You know, this is really cool. If you're even vaguely nerdy, you're very excited by this.
Right. Like I said, 30 minutes without knowing any Symbiota2 code, and you know, I can search for taxon summaries. So yeah.
Might not understand what they're saying, but
Evan, did you see my note in the chat?
Yeah, I'm having a really tough time finding it,
Oh, okay.
but I'm working on it.
So, yeah, so this will be kind of boring, but now is the documentation sheet publicly available, at least for reading?
I don't think so, not yet.
Well, we
Oh,
can
wait,
make
sorry.
it, we
It
can at
will
least,
be.
yeah.
Excuse me. Can I
and
just,
then,
2 seconds?
what?
2 seconds, please.
Yeah,
Symbiota2.org is the website where we put up the documentation thing. I was forgetting that. It is up there right now, but we had one of those terrible accidents you make once in your life only. The code for the site had not been backed up, and had to be install a new operating system and a bunch of other things. But Ali will have it up next week again, active, the Symbiota2 website, and that's where we had put up.
It
not
is
the
back up,
spreadsheet.
Mary.
Sorry?
It is back up. It's all looking good. It's all looking good.
I'm not sure it's the newest up. This is not the latest version yet, but it looks okay. So there's a functional version there. You can see the list, but what we haven't put up is the spreadsheet on the progress thing, if that's what you were asking about, Neil. Okay, but we've got
right.
pages. Okay, thanks, Will.
I think I've got it. It's the progress by page spreadsheet, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and so that is one thing I think we can work on after this meeting is to make sure that, yeah, things like this are posted up there. So it's really easy for people to see sort of exactly where we're at in this kind of final stretch.
yeah, it should be up next week then. If,
Yeah, and so, yeah, and we don't, I'm not asking you to go through this, Evan, but we do have this list of all the individual things that need to be completed and where things are at. And so you can, anyway, so that you can see.
Right. So the way we generated the spreadsheet is to pretty meticulously go through both Open Herbarium and Scan and list out all of the pages and say, what do we need to cover to make everything available in Symbiota2 that's available in Symbiota1. And so this is kind of our attempt to organize that process and assign work and all that good stuff. Yeah. So once we share it, you can see that work in progress. Since it didn't really make sense in the issues, and we're trying to get content generated as quickly as possible before we start addressing issues. So yeah.
Can I ask a question about that list?
Sure.
Sure.
Put it back up.
You say you want to enable orc ID per collector. What are you going to do about people that can't get orc IDs?
you mean
Just
the
make it
day?
optional, probably.
Yeah. It really thinking of current collectors, enabling them to be put up. And I mean, one of the things that strikes me is we are really so dependent, and everybody knows people that are really avid collectors in the area provide good specimens, et cetera, but then they get kind of overlooked, I think, sometimes how important they are. So it's just a way of enabling them to bring their information together, because there is this emphasis in ORCID to bring data together about what people have done.
So I think that's great. It's going to be optional. Could I just ask, is there a sort of a particular reason you're asking that? Is there a certain sort of concern underlying it? Or because I think anyone can claim an ORC ID. Again, I definitely don't think it should be mandatory. But is there sort of an underlying concern there?
About the data?
I'm asking Clay, Mary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out how to, okay, let's start with collector names are messy. And so you start wanting to clean that field up, but then you turn into an issue of, well, that doesn't accurately represent what's on the herbarium sheet. So then do we need two fields, like a verbatim collector name and then some sort of standardized or index collector name? And then to do that, it gets really hard and you go down a rabbit hole, and like Bionomia is doing a really good job of that. And so I opened a GitLab issue that says, well, maybe we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Maybe we should just integrate with Bionomia, which ingests from iDigBio, which Symbiota is going to push to. And then there would be, you know, joining the ecosystem to clean up these collector names and link them to some sort of index value, whether it's ORC ID or they use some other way for dead collectors. They seem to have that all figured out.
So that's really okay. Thank you for that. That's useful to know what the context is behind that. So I think we'll have to go through that issue, and maybe we can sort of have more of a conversation about that there. A thing I would add is, of course, you know, there's always going to be sacrosanct in the database, right? It's the unique ID that pairs back to the to the specimen itself. So you know, critically, there's always that link, even if something in the database changes. There's always that. But that's really helpful to know. That's the context where that's coming from. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Clay. That's a great idea, and I feel your pain about data cleanup. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say that, yeah, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, and if we can make David Shorthouse work for us, great.
it may be a limit, I mean, maybe a geographic limitation, I don't know, but in terms of who's covered, but I would totally agree. Let's look into the binomial and see how using it. And optional, yes. It was not a mandatory thing, it's just an option for people.
Cool. Anything else about the spreadsheet?
But the orc ID, that's associated with the collector, right?
I thought it'd be too complicated to try and do it for the associated collectors. And usually when you're looking for a specimen, it's under the primary collector.
So that's yes, it's just for the primary collector.
I suppose it could be for the others, but I would make it for the primary collector first. And many institutions that have their own databases already have a system in place for doing it, doing something equivalent, standardizing names, but it'll be only for the people that collect a lot into that collection. So there's, you know, again, there's something there, but that would not be general, whereas binomia is sort of generalized, I assume. The one that, for instance, Brigham Young University has been set up because of who they know about that, what they know about their collectors.
Yeah, the tough part is sort of what Clay touched on, is storing sort of multiple fields for a field for the collector, which could be someone from 100 years ago or whatever it is, right? Or I guess it's
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could
someone
be.
from 20 years ago who wouldn't have an ORCID ID, and I'm trying to think of a good way to explain it.
But I mean, it just seems like the short answer really might be to link directly to binomia to populate fields of interest.
Right.
Yeah, a thing I want to hesitate and warn about that is, remember, a lot of these things are live updating. So for example, if you, and also actually, it's not necessarily guaranteed names are going to be correct on those things anyway, but they do tend to update. So for example, if you go to my ORC ID, you'll find that my name's William D. Pierce and that I'm at McGill University. Which, I mean, is interesting because in some senses I am William D. Pierce. It's just no one ever calls me William. And I was at McGill 5 years ago. So what happens, therefore, when a portal user decide, I mean, how often do they refresh the database? So we need to, I think this is an ongoing conversation we need to have, but we need to be careful what we do when we have fields that could be populated by an external database, because we wouldn't want a portal manager to wake up one day and find that Will Pierce has been turned to William D. Pierce, you know, or Ian Banks has been turned to Ian M. Banks, you know, and then suddenly we've gone from science fiction to classical literature. But do you see what I mean? We wouldn't want a surprise. And so that's something to be careful of when we talk about populating.
Right. And then the issue for our database is that, okay, so we link directly to a user or something. But what if that user doesn't exist anymore? Or what if that user never existed? How do we populate that for existing data? Right. Like,
exactly.
right now the field is just someone's name. But
right,
if we make the field, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, and I was just going to say, and again, and critically, sorry, my Ian M. Banks reference was my way of also trying to sort of make, maybe nobody knows who he is. I've stopped referencing British science fiction authors. The critical thing being, some people have different names for different contexts. So I actually am Will Pierce, but on official things, I'm William D. Pierce. And so I would be annoyed potentially the herbarium, you know, our data in our database might be correct. And if we repopulate it as a surprise, even once, we might accidentally delete something that people really don't want. And then we just must be so careful to make sure we never, ever surprise the database holders, is all I'm sort of saying, because that update, and even in the case where we both have ORC ID information and don't, those are both scary for different reasons, is what I'm saying, which is related to what you're saying, Evan. But yeah.
But it's somewhat similar to this taxonomy field too, where there are some people, I can remember having a conversation that started with, we'd better sit down so I don't hit you from me. When somebody could not understand why we didn't just always link our names to a US database, so it could be updated and kept refreshed the whole time. So I think it's an issue that's a familiar one. You're right, it needs to be addressed here. As much as anything, I was thinking this wouldn't be relevant because the guy's long since dead. I think it took me a long time before I realized there were 10 different ways they were referring to one person who was the primary collector in Pakistan, but often he was just as the assistant, so-and-so. And
Yeah, so this is good. I think the value of these conversations during these meetings is to show you that each one of these lines requires a similar conversation. And that's why Symbiota2 is such a large project, right?
So let me expand on what Will is saying and what Clay brought up, because this is a well-known problem called entity resolution in databases. And this has to do with the linking of local identifier information to global, some kind of global identifier. In this particular case, ORC ID, but it could be photographer name, it could be some publication, it could be the collection. It's across the board throughout all Symbiota data. And so we need a sort of a general strategy for that. Now, I would also add that this is all value added stuff on top of Symbiota, right? So Symbiota does none of this. And so in order to address these larger issues where you link out to an ORC ID or some kind of publisher information, I don't know, there's a bunch of them for computer science. I don't know the biological equivalents for people identification. That's a larger issue that has to be addressed sort of systematically for a bunch of different kinds of data within Symbiota2.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Curtis. Agreed. Like this spreadsheet is supposed to list existing functionality that we're trying to recreate, whereas the GitLab issues are more for new feature requests. So yeah, great point.
Well, and I just wanted to make a plug for thinking about new features, things that other developers can make that would, I think, help the entire community. And so one example that I talked to Evan about yesterday was I was frustrated because there's over 1,000 people that have registered on SCAN, and there's no way to really even look at those names of people. And I really want to do I would love to do a couple of things. One is to just let the world know how many people and exactly what people have contributed to the data on a portal. And that's where I could see a page that would, if they did have an ORCID ID along with their name, it would list their ORCID ID and what collections that they've contributed to. But it would be great if, for example, you brought up a collection profile page, and in addition to the basic information there, it would actually list all of the people associated with that collection. And personally, I would like to be able to contact any one of them. And even more, I would like to see which ones have been the most active in entering data. It might be those people that I want to reach out to, because a lot of times you'll email a curator, which is not really involved in the digitization, and it could take weeks or that you just never get a response. So that would be an example of what of like sort of a new module that I would love to see implemented, at least in SCAN.
And the work Darius has done over the past week would make something like that fairly trivial, right? Like we have, as I was talking about, API routes to access all of that data. And based on the user interface work that Darius has done, we can just add another, option in the collection, profile collection edit page, where you can see all of those editors and admins, which I think, Darius, you had that already today, didn't you?
Yeah, for the collection, yeah, we can see admins, and yeah, we have a whole list of all the roles for the collection.
Right. So admins and editors would be the people contributing to that collection. And then for something like the finer grain stats you're looking for, Neil, who's the most prevalent uploader to this collection? Be fairly trivial to add something to Darius's design to do that. So
Could you also do it and make the collector could have the option of generating what they have done in terms of, you know, specimens annotated, collected, et cetera, et cetera.
That would probably be like a feature, because now we're more doing user stuff and less collection, more to just like a user profile. So
No, it was just, sorry, sometimes there are a lot of ideas that come up as a result of
yeah,
these
I've definitely been
conversations.
thinking about that as we flush it out. I'm like, I feel like we're missing a user profile page, but definitely in the future.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, I think that's it. And I know I speak for everyone when I say that when Will's not here, the energy level seems to be lower. So why don't we end this meeting with Will, you providing your typical chirpy cherry UK message to all of us?
Well, I've already provided it in the chat, actually, Neil. I just encourage everyone to go away and, you know, this week, your homework for the next fortnight is to go away and really dig into the Culture series by Ian M. Banks, because it's not just a celebrated, you know, literary author as Ian Banks, but also a celebrated science fiction author is Ian M. Banks. I would strongly recommend starting with the third book in the series, Use of
Okay.
So what do we do if we've already read it?
Well, see me after class. Oh, good. That's brilliant. Oh, I didn't know. Good man. Good man. Well done.
Okay, I guess I'll just end by saying we're all open to having individual meetings with anyone that that wants to meet with one or more of us. And otherwise, the next meeting will basically be when we've reached critical mass for showing an update. It most likely will be at least a month from now. And with that, then if there are no other questions or comments, I'll end the recording and stop the meeting.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
thanks so much, everybody.